Are you making the one mistake that keeps fat loss from ever sticking? When most people try to lose weight, they follow the same playbook that they've heard for years. Cut carbs, cut sugars, exercise more, start fasting. But even though that's the exact advice everyone keeps repeating, the weight still doesn't come off for so many people. Or even more frustrating, it comes off only to show right back up again. I see this problem constantly with tens of thousands of people who go through my challenges every single year, every single month. Fortunately, once that misunderstanding gets cleared up, fat loss stops feeling random and starts becoming more predictable. So in this video, I'm going to show you what the one mistake is, how it sabotages fat loss, even when you're being disciplined, and what you should be doing instead so that your body stops pushing back and finally starts burning fat. The best way to understand this mistake is to look at what happened on The Biggest Loser. You remember that show? Contestants lost extraordinary amounts of weight in a very short amount of time. They had world-class trainers, tightly controlled diets, constant supervision, nothing else to focus on except losing weight. And during the show, it looked like it worked. Some of the contestants lost well over 100 pounds in a matter of weeks. But the truth didn't show up until years later. Researchers followed the contestants, very interesting, long after the cameras were gone. And what they found was alarming. Out of the contestants that they studied, 13 of the 14 regained a significant amount of weight that they had lost, and 4 of them ended up heavier than before the show even started. So it got me thinking, where did things go wrong? What one mistake caused all these people that had so much success to lose massive amounts of weight, only to gain it back or even more later? It wasn't the exercise. It wasn't the food. It was the extreme caloric restriction. So the idea that forcing yourself to eat fewer calories will lead to permanent fat loss, that is the mistake. It's some of the most common fat loss advice on the internet, and it backfires every single time. That's because it doesn't just make fat loss harder, it actually triggers a biological response that works against you in just about every way possible. When calorie intake drops aggressively, the body doesn't think, oh, we're dieting, time to lose weight, like our brain is thinking. Our body doesn't think that. Instead, it freaks out. And the first place that shows up is in your metabolism. One of the earliest and strongest responses to caloric restriction is a slowdown in how much energy your body burns at rest. This is exactly what the researchers later measured in The Biggest Loser contestants. Years after the show ended, their resting metabolism was still dramatically lower than expected, which means on average, they were burning about 500 fewer calories per day than someone else of the same size. Even after putting the weight back on and getting back to a bigger size, that means their bodies were using far less energy just to function. At the same time, metabolism slows down, hunger ramps up, and not just by a little bit. When you consistently don't eat enough calories, hunger actually rises more than metabolism slows down. One study showed that for every 1 kilogram of weight lost, every 2.2 pounds that you lost, appetite increased by roughly 100 calories per day above baseline. That's about 3 to 5 times greater than the slowdown in your metabolism. So by the time someone had lost 22 pounds, their brain is pushing them to eat about an extra 1,000 calories a day. It's cranking up the hunger and the cravings, and their body is burning about 200 fewer calories per day. Not only that, when calories stay low, one of the fastest ways for your body to conserve energy is by breaking down muscle. That's because muscle tissue requires energy all day, every day. So when you start restricting calories, these are calorie counting, and severely restricting your calories, your body sees it as expendable. On average, about 25% of the weight people lose during dieting comes from fat-free mass, including muscle. And as we talked about before on my channel, muscle is one of the most metabolically active tissues in your body. So the more you lose, the lower your baseline for burning fat every day. That can create a vicious cycle where less muscle results in lower daily burn, which results in you eating less, and then you lose even more muscle. And this is why the long-term failure rate of caloric restriction is so brutal. Those Biggest Loser contestants losing all that weight, damaging their metabolism, the body stays in conservation mode. It's almost scared to burn more, lowers its caloric burn, and then now the person starts eating more, gaining weight back with less efficient metabolism because of such extreme calorie restriction. Across multiple long-term studies, roughly 80 to 95% of people who lose weight through caloric restriction regain most of it within 3 to 5 years. That failure rate is so high that if it were a drug, the government would pull it from the market. But that doesn't stop people from thinking that the key to fat loss is starving themselves. Just know that while you might see progress in the short run, tracking your macros, counting all your calories, you almost always pay for it in the end. So if restricting calories isn't the answer to long-term fat loss, then what actually works? Over the past 15 years of helping people through this and helping people lose weight as one of their primary goals and overcome medications and overcome diseases, I boiled it down to a 3-step framework. And at the core of it, simple idea. Your body doesn't count calories. It reads signals. Every bite of food you take sends a signal, a communication line to your body, giving it instructions of what to do with the food. It determines if the food you eat gets stored as fat or gets burned as energy. And it's why two people can eat the same number of calories and get completely different results. The research on this fascinates me because there's so many approaches. You're eating the same amount of calories, but some people will lose doing one approach and some people will lose doing another. So instead of starting with just how do I eat less, I start with the question of what is my food telling my body to do? Let me give an example. The first signal in the framework is insulin. This is the signal that tells your body whether or not it can burn stored fat. If insulin stays high, fat loss never happens, no matter how disciplined you are. For those who don't know, insulin's the hormone that your body uses to move sugar out of your blood and into storage. So when you eat foods that break down into sugar quickly, insulin rises. And when insulin is high, your body prioritizes using that incoming sugar for energy. That means it won't bother burning stored fat because your body has all the energy it needs. That's why the number of times that you spike insulin is more important than how much you eat. If you spend all day grazing and constantly eating snacks, your body never gets a real break from it, which means it never fully switches to downgrade insulin and tap into fat burning mode. So the first step is to reduce how often you eat. Stick to real meals, whether that's 1 or 2 or 3 per day, because the concept of fasting can still be very beneficial. It is very different than just caloric restriction. And ideally, a lot of us just need to get into a rhythm of avoiding snacking in between these meals. Give your body clear windows between meals where nothing is coming in except water. In addition, you also want to pay attention to how sharply you spike insulin. Everything you put in is going to potentially flood the bloodstream with sugars or start tapping into fat. Foods that digest very quickly, such as white bread, white rice, cereal, pastries, granola bars, anything with sugar or refined carbs, causes high, sharp insulin spikes, which shut down fat burning more aggressively. On the other hand, foods that digest more slowly create smaller spikes that don't. That's why instead of eating a carb-only meal that digests fast and spikes insulin hard, you add protein, you add natural healthy fats, you add and you keep fiber associated with those carbs. These slow digestion. They allow sugar to enter your bloodstream much more gradually. That way insulin doesn't have to surge high, which brings us to the second signal. This one determines how many calories you burn when you're just sitting still. And that signal comes from protein. Remember that vicious cycle that we just talked about earlier, where muscle loss lowers your metabolism. And then your metabolism forces you to eat less, which then causes you to lose even more muscle. It's something that you want to avoid at all costs, especially as you get older, because muscle isn't just about strength or appearance. It plays a major role in how many calories your body burns every day. The more muscle you have, the more energy your body uses. So you want to eat in a way that tells your body, keep the muscle, don't break it down. Now, I'm not saying you got to lift a bunch of weights, but we want to make sure we're maintaining muscle and it's not degrading. And the primary food signal that does that is protein. And when you eat enough, you're giving your body the building blocks it needs to maintain muscle. And not only that, protein also plays a big role in controlling overeating. Your body has a strong biological drive to get enough protein. If it doesn't, hunger tends to stick around, even if you've already eaten more calories than you should. So by getting enough protein each day, you reduce the chances of your body nudging you to overconsume food later. How much protein do you actually need? Well, here's what I recommend based on your health goals. If your main focus is healthy aging and maintaining muscle, aim for 0.5 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, it's 100 grams of protein daily. You're averaging 30, 35 per meal. You can get that with a nice chicken breast. If you have an active lifestyle with regular walking, yoga, regular consistent exercise, aim for 0.75 grams per pound of body weight per day to help support recovery, to help support your energy. And if you're doing strength training and you're being very intentional of, shredding up and adding lots of muscle, aim for 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. That level helps preserve or even build lean muscle while also losing fat. Now, a good rule is to make sure every meal has clear protein source, a clean one, pasture-raised eggs, grass-fed beef, free-range chicken, wild-caught fish, Greek yogurt if you can tolerate dairy, and just make sure there's no other additives to it and it has active cultures, or have a collagen shake. You could even do some whey if you wanted to. So as long as they don't have a whole bunch of sugars or artificial ingredients, then those should be good. Which brings us to the third signal. This one involves your liver. The most important organ when it comes to fat loss. You can think of it as your body's energy traffic controller. It processes everything that enters your body: sugar, fat, hormones, toxins. And when it comes to food, it helps decide whether that energy gets burned or stored. If the liver's overwhelmed because it's constantly dealing with toxins that you're putting into your body, it shifts focus. Instead of prioritizing fat burning efficiency, it prioritizes detox and repair. That's why I don't just look at calories. I look at what I call interference. Foods and ingredients that overload the liver. Every time those come in, the signal you're sending is stop doing what you're doing and deal with this toxin now. So what are some of the biggest offenders that stop your liver in its tracks and why these are so important? Refined sugar and processed carbs, which keep blood sugar unstable and insulin elevated. Rancid oils, which are common in packaged in restaurant foods. Seed oils. They drive inflammation. They signal the body to store fat in an unhealthy way. Artificial ingredients. This is why it's so important, especially artificial sweeteners. They're treated like toxins in the body, and the liver has to bump those to the very fast pass, front of the line, top priority of what it has to deal with because they're so toxic. Highly processed proteins, deli meats, protein bars, even protein powders, if they're of poor quality, overload your liver with chemical additives that prevent it from burning fat. If those are coming in day after day, even a little bit here, a little bit there, the liver stays under constant pressure. Now here's the problem. Most people hear or move the foods that block fat loss and they assume they already know what those foods are. We pick up that diet mentality immediately as opposed to the quality lens. I just listed a few of them in some categories, but there are so many foods. And in my experience, almost everyone is still eating at least one food every day that sends that signal, even if they think they're eating healthy. So that's why in my next video I created, I show you the exact foods I remove first, why each one blocks fat loss, and the order you need to eliminate them in. That way your body burns fat instead of pushing back. So if you're serious about fat loss, this is a must watch. I'll put a link to that video right here. Click to watch it next, and I'll see you there.